everybody. Welcome to a great edition, a very special edition, in fact, of Wrestling with the Future. I'm your host, Psychic Medium Angelo, joined by my co-host, Dan the Man Sebastiano. Danny, how you doing?
I'm good, Angelo. Looking forward to this. How you doing?
I'm wonderful. Dan, you have sporting a new hat this week. Do you have one in every color?
Yeah, I do. It starts getting a little warmer. You get the nice linen ones out, put the wool ones away.
I keep threatening, I don't know if you heard the last show, but Brian, I keep threatening to tell Rico Costantino that Dan is a cross between he and Wolverine and the battle of the mutton chops here.
I can see it. That's for sure.
And I'm also joined by director, actor, writer, producer, filmmaker extraordinaire, Mike, the movie maker Messier. Mikey, how are you tonight?
I'm pretty excited, Angelo, because we've got a young guest on tonight. I was a fan of his father's. I'm a fan of his. And it's always interesting when you start becoming a fan of young wrestlers and then you see their second generation become young wrestlers too. So I guess I'm getting old, buddy, but it's pretty cool to be talking to this guy tonight. I'm excited about it.
Good. Well, I am too. I've had the pleasure of meeting our guest previously, and it was a brief encounter, but he made quite an impression, and he's making an impression, in fact, ladies and gentlemen, everywhere he goes. He began his career in February of 2017 by announcing to the world that he would follow in his father's footsteps. That decision was met with a great deal of anticipation and, quite frankly, was met with a little concern by others, and we'll get into that in a little while. He made his pro wrestling debut for the New Jersey-based CZW company in January of 2018 at Dojo Wars. And later that same year, he signed with MLW Major League Wrestling in May of 2019. In fact, a year ago this month, he was a surprise Battle Royal participant at AEW's inaugural pay-per-view event, Double or Nothing. He is a second-generation legacy wrestler. He is a man who is making it out and carving out his own way in this crazy rough and tumble world of professional wrestling. It's my honor and my pleasure to introduce a man I'm proud to call a friend. Would you please welcome Flying Brian Pillman Jr. Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going? Careful
putting that. How are you, young man?
Putting that flying in there. I don't want them thinking I'm flying all the time.
Right.
I'm grounded and technical and safe.
Oh, absolutely.
We're going to have a long career, not a short one,
Well, and we're going to talk about that. We're actually going to, that's really a great segue.
Well,
we're going to actually talk about that.
It's crazy if you think about it. My father only wrestled for, 11 years, So it's like, damn. You got guys that are wrestling for 20 and 30 years these days and working into their old age, guys getting back in the ring. So with all the technology and things we have, we just we gotta take care of our bodies these days.
Absolutely. Brian, a lot of times, a moniker can make you or break you. Do you feel at any time pigeonholed by the Flying Brian moniker?
I feel like I did a good job of not, pigeonholing myself in there. Like I still use, the nickname on social media and stuff sometimes, like on my Twitter or whatever. But as far as like being advertised for matches and stuff, I always tell them, it's just Brian Pillman Jr. I don't have to be Flying Brian. I can be
absolutely
a million other things. There's an entire canvas of art that we can work with in the wrestling ring. And, I try to just keep it, Bruce Hart always told me, if you're going to do something, make sure it means something. Right. Absolutely. So I'm not just going to do stuff and jump off stuff just for the hell of it. And make sure it's a huge moment, make sure it means something, I don't be doing dives and stuff unless it's a big match and unless the match builds up to that point, if
let's talk about...
If you're only given 8 to 10 minutes, why would you start jumping off shit,
Sure.
Start jumping off shit, when you can't win, when it's a long match, you just don't know what else to do.
Sure.
Your opponent's kicking out of everything. So you're like, oh, well, fuck, what do I do now? I guess I'll jump off some shit, So you jump
Right.
off the
Where
top
did the
rope.
moniker the Promised Prince come from?
Huh?
Where did the Promised Prince come from?
Well, that's kind of my expression of my story and how I think that, with my dad naming me Brian, he sort of promised to the world that I would wrestle and that I would carry on his legacy. So, and of course,
Was it almost a foregone conclusion? I know you didn't enter wrestling immediately. You really gave it some thought. You worked an office job. You had a regular gig.
I fought it for many years. I didn't want to stoop down and try to pick up somebody else's legacy. I was always warned about stepping in those shoes and following in those footsteps, and I was warned about the bad side of it, and not very many people put me over to the good side of it and all the awesome things that I could accomplish. And I think people were just afraid of what might happen, if I did get involved in the business. But
yeah,
the business is very different these days, and it's very lucrative and it's very enjoyable. A lot of guys are not out doing wild things. There's not as many guys partying and drinking and driving and stuff and getting in trouble. So, I think it's a great time to be a wrestler. It's a great career to.
It really is. It really is. You heard me say at the beginning of the show that when you finally announced that you were going to follow in your dad's footsteps, you were met with great acclaim, and there were other people who weren't so eager to say, does he really want to do this, or is he headed for that same road? That's always a concern, and I'm old enough to appreciate that sentiment, because I've seen lots of second and third generation wrestlers really fall by the wayside. I got to say to people, and I'll say this to you, and I've said it privately to you, but I'll say it publicly. You're a guy that's making his own way with his own name, and kudos to you for it, brother.
Thank you. It's been very hard to separate that, to separate that shadow from who I am. But, that's why I've always approached wrestling with kind of a clean slate. I'm not really ever trying to copy anybody. I watch a variety of things. I don't just watch WWE, or I don't just watch this or that. I watch all kinds of shit, and just try to, I just try to be a mutt of styles, a mixture of styles. That way nobody can try to pinpoint where I got what or how I was inspired by this.
Right.
I'm focused on being creative and trying to make people second guess, oh, well, where did he pick that up from? Or, oh, that's kind of innovative, Yeah. So to me, and that's how I've approached everything.
When you started out with CZW, was there any resistance by any of the other boys? The fact that you're, the son of a pretty damn well-known pro wrestler, did you get any resistance or pushback because you're Brian Pillman Jr.?
I only actually did a couple training shows with them called Dojo Wars.
Right.
I was so early on in my career. I think people were still, just excited to see what I could do. And actually, DJ Hyde and CZW guys, all those guys were actually really helpful at the beginning. They were probably the most least judgmental group as far as the different small town training groups I've gone to. In the Northeast, they really took care of me and they helped me kind of get started, get in touch with Teddy, and Teddy would come to those training shows and kind of take me under his wing and teach me a few things. And then eventually, what came to be the Hart Foundation and MLW, kind of started up there, going to Dojo Wars. And so I never actually worked a CZW main roster show. I only did the Dojo Wars. Yeah. But the people I met along the way, that kind of got me started, in the Northeast area, and especially MLW. They do so much business in New York and Queens and stuff. So,
Oh, sure,
you know,
yeah.
I made those connections in the Northeast because that's where like a lot of the best wrestling is, you know, and a lot of the good talent is. So,
Absolutely.
and I ended up
Dan.
dating a girl from up there, so it made things even easier, you know.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dan.
Hey, Brian. I just want you to, Angelo mentioned before we kind of look at the human side of things. I had a chance to see you in your early career. You performed here in Virginia, and you made some comments in one of the promos you had about, the natural flow and basically like, you were born to do this. I'm curious because it wasn't an immediate choice. When was the moment? Can you kind of expand on when the moment was when you woke up and were like, I'm going to be a wrestler?
It's crazy because most people would probably be like, oh, well, you know, it was this long decision. It wasn't just one day and one moment, but it was always sitting in the back of my head. That's true. But there actually was a very single fucking moment where I was just like, I'm fed up with it. Like, I'm doing it. Like, I actually woke up one day and made a phone call as soon as my eyes opened up that day. I started making phone calls because I was like, I'm done. Like, I'm done with this normal life, you know, crap. I want to be something greater, and I want to use my gifts in the way I look and in my physical ability to make a living. You know, I was tired of just relying on, you know, the office structure of things and kissing ass and just, you know, doing.
What was the first call you made?
I called Steve. I called Steve Austin. I asked him where I could train and where I could get started. And then we talked about.
Brian, you've been very, very fortunate. You have a handful of really, really good wrestling uncles. Uncle Steve Austin is one of them. Uncle Kevin Sullivan is another. You know, you got a lot of great relatives there, brother.
I'm very
were they
blessed.
straight with you? Were they straight up with you? Did they shoot
Well,
with you?
I wasn't even finished telling you just how it came to be, you know.
Oh yeah, please.
Because what really got me was I had I'd gotten this big boy job at a college. I had my degree. I had my own house, and like I had a couple roommates, but you know, they bought a house and they were like, hey, you want to help us, you know, with this house? You know, just pay rent. You know, it's got tons of bedrooms, stuff. I'm like, hell yeah. So I'm living with my two best friends from high school. Everything in life could be perfect, but for some reason something was missing, right? And I would go out and I would get stood up by girls, and girls wouldn't want to hang out with me or talk to me. And I'm just like, why am I so, you know, unattractive? Why am I so dull and boring? And why, you know, why is everything just a routine and that? So really, I went out with some friends, and like, I went out with this girl. I was totally into her, hanging out with her. And she ends up leaving to go hang out with some guy because he had cocaine or something. And I'm just like, if that's how the world works, that the fucking good kid that fucking got the job and is fucking got the money, you know, sharply dressed, you know, can talk well, educated, and he can't get fucking laid because some other dude's got a bag of coke on him, you know?
Yeah.
And I thought, if I'm going to get ahead in life, I got to be a little bit more dangerous. I got to be a little bit badder. And I gotta do something to up my cool factor. And I thought there's no better way. There's no better way to get into my own skin and to really, you know, show these people what I'm all about than to really follow my genetics and my history as a person. And instead of trying to be normal, I was trying to be normal for so long that I realized that trying to be normal is the easiest way to fall into obscurity. And you got to try to be better.
Oh, absolutely. I am so glad.
So yeah, some girls ditched me, and I said, "Fuck it, I'll be a pro wrestler." So I want everyone in the world, you know, one day when I'm the WWE champion, to thank that girl. We're all gonna give her a call and say thank you, thank you.
Exactly.
Thank you for
dumping
Brian Pillman Jr.
Well, you had Angelo brought up the point of your wrestling uncles and the advice. How did that conversation, when you said your first call was to Steve Austin, and then I assume, you know, later conversations you had with Uncle Bookerman and the rest of your family, did you have how'd that conversation with Steve Austin go?
Well, he originally had told me to go over to Les Thatcher just because that was the most local thing to me, which in all reality would have been a great idea. But Les had no longer been training guys. You know, he didn't really have a ring set up and a rigorous schedule or anything. And I was like, yeah, you know what? Let me go with Lance because Lance has this huge facility. You know, he's got a structure, he's got a schedule, and he knows what he's doing. Super safe guy and super prestigious trainer. And then that's when Steve was like, "Oh hell yeah!" Like I didn't know, you know, he's like, "If you can go up there, if you got the money to go to Calgary and live," and I was like, "Well, I got unemployment, and I'm living on that, so I'll just go live in Canada for a bit."
There you go. Mike
Because they
Messier.
laid me off because I told them I wanted to be a wrestler, and they were like, "Well, we're gonna lay people off in June anyway, so we'll just help you go live your dream." And I wasn't mad at all. I was happy as hell to be laid off.
Go ahead, Mikey.
I listened to your interview with, I believe his name is Chris Van Vliet.
Yeah, he's the man.
Yeah, and you guys had a really good rapport, and you told that story about how you happened to get, laid off and were able to collect unemployment, which kind of, in a way, facilitated your training, which is awesome. And one of the things you said to Chris that I wanted to kind of follow up on, Brian, was you're very aware of your neck and your brain as far as taking headshots, unnecessary, stiff headshots. And, as wrestling fans, we could all clamor for the days of Bubba Ray Dudley smashing, Louis Piccoli over the head with a chair shot. But
Yeah.
I saw that in person and almost it looked like it was going to kill the guy, that particular chair shot. But we've come to a point where we realize more about concussions and some of these high impact moves, which might look great for the fans, but for the guys that are taking them. I just wanted to ask you, how do you go into battle? How do you go into that arena of wrestling? And just as a lesson for other young wrestlers to have a great match, but don't sacrifice quite literally your neck or your brain in doing it.
Yeah, it's crazy because I've never actually met a promoter that was like, you better go out there and bleed, or you better go hit each other in the head with chairs. You know what I mean? So
Right.
To be quite honest, it's a lot of the times it's the boys bringing it upon themselves. A lot of these risks are being taken. It's like, oh, well, the promoter pressured me into it. I'm like, no, he didn't. You know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
they want to do it because they want to get the pop and they want to get the reaction, right? A lot of guys live for the pop, man. They don't give a shit how much they're being paid. If they can hear a crowd reaction, and I get it. I love the pop. I love coming through that curtain and hearing a crowd.
But the question becomes, Brian, at what cost?
Yeah, at what cost? I'm very blessed. I'm very lucky. I have a sort of mystique and star power that I can come through the curtain and get a pop. Some other guys have to hit each other across the head of the chair. I've never taken a chair shot to the head. I take them to the back. I give them to the back. I've never hit anybody in the head with a chair. Okay, I'll take that back. I took a fucking step stool to the back of the head, but it was from L.A. Park. I didn't know enough Spanish to tell him not to. So
No, me
I want to
gusta.
remind people that you've only been doing this for 3 or 4 years. So you're really, really young in the business. I mean, really young. And so you've got not only a long career ahead of you, but you've got a body of work behind you already that speaks volumes for the kind of worker you are. If you have any input or say about it, are you able to mentor or coach, younger guys or guys your age that maybe will listen to you because of who you are? And
well, that's the thing. I got
some of that wisdom.
Yeah, I got a young guy here in the area named James Lee, and he was training at one of the local schools. But the problem you run into with wrestling is, if it's not your school, if it's not your training facility, you just got to kind of keep your mouth shut and not offend anybody because, everybody trains and coaches a different way. But to be fair, there's a lot of things I see that, they could be doing better and that might be wrong. But I go to the training to help out, and I go to kind of, show my idea of things, but I can't make them drink. You know what I mean? I can lead them to the water and say, hey, you need to get on your social media. You need to go get booked other places and quit just hanging out at training and doing the student shows. Hey, you're ready for this. Hey, you want to get in a car? You want to go to Chicago? But these kids in this local fed, this training school, I'm not saying any names, put anybody under as opposed to putting them over. But if I put them over, I'll tell you it's a great school. It's led by one of the ex-WWF referee, and he's a great trainer. And all these kids are super well trained. Their problem is that they live in they have this super small hive mind mindset that they're just going to make it to the WWE if they just keep going to training and keep doing the student shows. And like the independent scene isn't as modern here in Cincinnati. It's still a little bit old school. It's not as big as shows, it's not drawn as well as it did back in the day, with the HWA and the Midwest used to have, Cincinnati used to actually have a lot bigger wrestling events than they do now.
Sure. Oh my God. Yeah.
So I tell these kids, I'm like, look, we got to go to the hotbeds. We got to go to Chicago. We got to go to New Jersey, the Northeast. We got to go to all these other places. And then lo and behold, there's one kid that gets in the car with me to go to all these places, so. And that's part of it too, man. It's just like when you're in a craft like this, you just got to open up your mind and be willing to make sacrifices and take chances. And it's crazy to me because I have all the advantages, right? So I would expect if I'm taking these risks and these chances to drive all these places and to do all this stuff, but like the young kids that have nothing going for them don't want to do it, but they see me doing it, but they're like, it's weird. It's honestly the craziest thing ever. Right. It blows my mind every day that these kids, they say that they want to, make it to the WWE, but they don't. They think that like they're not supposed to. My question is always been like the indies are like too beneath them. I'm like, no, the indies are like literally how you get there. Like every time, I would not be doing like. That's what I tell them. I'm like, why do you think I'm doing this? Like,
Well, I got
on the indies. If I wanted to, I would just go ask for a tryout. But I understand that the better way to have a more respected and illustrious career is to at least start.
Brother, let me tell you something. I'll say that I'll go on record as saying this. If you play your cards right and you're good at what you do, you can make a living on the indies. When people say to me, how do I get to the WWE? My first question is, why would you want to?
Oh yeah, why would you want to go straight there? When you can make all your mistakes out here.
Right. Exactly.
You go there, they're like, damn, this guy's. They can't see through your shit because you're just keeping it simple and you're smart because you've already done all the dumb shit on the indies. And they're like, why is this guy so reserved? Why is he such a solid worker? Oh, he's got really good ring cardio. Is that because he fucking wrestled 5 years on the indies, or did he sit twiddling his thumbs? Like, you don't just wait. Like, I've met guys like that too that are like really big athletes. Or they're like real big bodybuilders. And they'll ask me, like, oh man, you get me to the WWE? And I'm like, yeah, meet me at, I give him the address of the local school. And I'm like, yeah, you got to pay this guy $1,200. He'll train you to be a wrestler. And then you got to drive to shows for the next 2 or 3 or 4 years and DVDs. And then you might get a tryout. And then they hear that and they're like, oh, man, I got to do all that. I can't afford the training. Like, can I just go to the
exactly.
And I'm like, all right, go to the Performance Center. Get your tryout. I'll never see you again.
Exactly. You're exactly right. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's sad because you see that a lot. You're not the first person, I think, even that we've had on the show that's mentioned that, where people want the results, but they don't want to put the effort in. But I think it's interesting today, especially I'm sure you've seen it in your experience, is there's more talent on the indie market that wants to stay on the indie market. Like Angelo mentioned, they enjoy what they do. They're honing their craft. They're, 5 years in. And I think you're in the perfect window there. So let me expand on that thought, or I should say, ask you to expand on that thought. You talked about the indie markets, the go-to areas, New York, New Jersey, Chicago. How does one get from a small area where maybe you mentioned when Austin had you training to getting to Chicago? I mean, do you put your own feelers out there? Do they recruit you? Do you just show up one day and say, hey, you know, I want something? How does that go about? Walk us through that.
Well, just like anything in life, I think the biggest strength in pro wrestling is networking and meeting people and making friends. And you know, I can keep going on about it, but it's always through social media, and it's always through you know, people that are willing to put themselves out there and tweet about certain things, or even just cut a promo and put it on Twitter. You know, just doing your best to be out there. You know, you got to treat yourself like a star. You know, you got to really, you know, you got to be very outgoing. I always say that, you know, there's two types of people that are going to succeed in wrestling, and it's, you're either super passionate about it and you love it and you'll literally cut your arm off to be a pro wrestler, or you're batshit crazy and you're just a crazy person.
Yeah.
And oftentimes those two things intersect.
Yeah,
oftentimes
absolutely.
the passion and the craziness will intersect, and then you get a hell of a worker. But I'm telling you, most of the like, I've never met somebody that I was like, man, he's really normal. And
Yeah,
he was
right.
also a successful, good wrestler. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Every successful, good wrestler was either batshit, passionate, crazy about it, and then they were kind of normal, or they were just batshit crazy, and it didn't matter how much they loved wrestling. They were just that fucking crazy.
Let's talk
They
about
were going to
that,
be drawn to it either way.
Brian. Let's talk about that fine line. You know, your father's moniker for a long time was the Loose Cannon. I had the chance to know your father a little bit, and I will tell you, for people who don't know, Brian Pillman was a fucking genius. Straight up. He was a genius. A mad genius sometimes, yeah, but so was Dusty Rhodes. So was Vince McMahon. So was any great mind in wrestling. And I will tell you that the line between genius and insanity is like Carl Wallenda walking the tightrope.
Yeah.
You know?
It's a thin line.
So
Yeah,
do you now, at this point in your career, Brian, do you still get that inevitable comparison to your father, Brian Pillman?
You know, I think people are starting to realize me for my own strengths and weaknesses, for sure, my own performances. But there has been some rough patches where people have tried to, you know, force me into a role that I was not comfortable with, or they tried to book a match that just made no sense. You know, like, with all due respect to Kevin Sullivan, we had that matchup in Seattle at this historic ballroom arena.
Yeah.
Thousands of people. And it's like, we go out there and, you know, the booker wants me to be this bloodthirsty, savage, loose cannon beast. I try to tell him that's not me. I don't do that.
Right.
I show him the clip of me and the Hart Foundation kind of beating up on Kevin Sullivan. I'm like, hey, this is what we did on MLW. Like, see, we're just kind of like, we're bad dudes, but, you know, I still wrestle. Like, I still want to have a match with him. And he's like, oh, no, you're going to go out there and you're going to be bloodthirsty and you're going to kill him. And there's going to be lots of color. And Kevin's like, yeah, I'm going to get all this color. And then they had a thing where he was going to blow a fireball in my face and it all, and I don't know, I guess the clips are out there now on Botchamania, but it all just kind of, I watched it.
Yeah.
It ended up being funny. I thought it was hilarious. I was like, this is.
Well, it tells me here's a guy that shouldn't be a fucking promoter and should be out of the damn business.
Yeah. So it's like, I don't put it all on Kevin and all. And maybe the promoter just had a creative idea, but I think the responsibility falls on both of them too. I don't think Kevin's completely not at fault, but the fact of the matter is they put a young dude in there that was not, you know, as experienced, and I just wanted to have a fucking wrestling match, you know.
Yeah.
And I tried to call a bunch of spots with him. And that's the thing. If Kevin would have been receptive to my ideas and just said, hey, let me call a couple spots to you, because I tried talking to him and stuff, and it ended up just all falling apart. You know, it was the biggest.
Well, you know what? I'm going to pick up on that.
But that's the thing. Like, out of all the shit that I've been through and could have done, and that was the worst thing, I'm not even mad about it, because some people could have set me up for much worse scenarios, right?
But you know what? But I'm going to pick up right there where you left off, because of all the people who should know the distinction between Brian Pillman and Brian Pillman Jr.
This was early in my career, so I can see where, you know, they were kind of fantasizing about this idea, and they might not have really understood what I was all about. You know, they just still had this clouded thought in their mind, oh, we're going to have Pillman Jr. come up here, and he's going to drink Kevin Sullivan's blood and get revenge, and then there's going to be fire, and there's going to, you know, it's like, Jesus Christ, dude. Like, I couldn't, and then I was like, what do you want us to do? Like, and he's like, oh, well, it's just going to break down, and it's going to go nuts, and then the commentator's going to walk up, and you're going to shoot on him, and then I'm going to come out, and you're going to shoot on me,
and that's why some ideas are better left alone.
So I straight up punched these guys because I was pissed for real. So I was like, fuck it, I'll punch him. I don't give a shit. You want to get punched through a stupid ass angle when I just wanted to have a match in front of fucking 3,000 people in this historic ballroom, and you make me go out there and have a fucking abortion? You know, it's like, fuck you.
And Mikey Messier, go ahead, babe.
Well, I just what I was going to say earlier was that Brian, what I've respected about your career so far, it's kind of that maybe the wrestling fan or the promoters that were fans of your dad want to pigeonhole you, as you were saying, to be loose cannon number 2 or carry on this tradition of controversy and madness. But you've really gone the other way, which I like, in that it's not a insult, but you kind of are doing the white meat babyface thing. At least, you know, and what do you call yourself? The king of the mullet king?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that is working because it's kind of a throwback to the early 80s. This is your baby face. This is your good guy. This is your... Yeah. And I think that's working for you.
And the crowd doesn't have to think about it. You know, I come through the curtain. They see a blonde mullet. They smile. They know who the good guy is, right?
Exactly.
You know, the story is told as soon as you take a step out there, right? The story starts telling itself. Mm-hmm. And if you can do enough of your storytelling outside of the ring, then you don't have to do as much when you get in the ring, right?
Well, brother, the mullet's over. Let's be honest about it.
And if the other guy comes out and he's wearing all black and he's got vampire fangs, okay, we know that's the bad guy. So when the match starts, we get right into it. You know, we don't have to do all this precursory, you know, step selling and out wrestling and who's out wrestling who and who's getting pressure over who. We can just start the match. That motherfucker can jump me, and I'm already in peril. You know, I'm like Hulk Hogan. I'm already over, so just jump me and let's get into the heat.
Exactly.
There you go.
No finger shaking, though. No, I was going to say you should.
I want Mikey, just before you continue that, I want people to know I saw Brian wrestled a local favorite here, Breaker Morant.
Yep.
Wrestled him in October. Now here's a guy that's in uber babyface, right? Brian got the pop. Okay, Brian got the pop.
Nice.
By the time the match was over, they didn't know who to cheer for, but they certainly weren't booing anybody.
Right.
I was trying to get booed.
And Brian, you remember that night? It was a really small crowd, but they were really into it.
Yeah, they were very receptive to what we were doing.
Very. I think there was only maybe 100 people there.
Yeah.
You know, it was a miserable night out, and it looked like at one point the locker room was going to outnumber the crowd, but, Now, let's talk about that. When you're working, do you work the same intensity for 10 people that you do for 1,000?
I mean, I definitely work the same level, of craftsmanship for sure. I definitely try to have the best match I can because I know that every time I get in the ring, I'm being filmed and I can't just mail it in on any given day. But, there's certain risks that you're going to take in the front of a bigger crowd that you're not going to take in front of a regular crowd,
Yeah.
But I've never been big on doing dives to the floor anyways. So it's like, if I'm doing a small show, it's not that much different than me doing a medium show. Sure. I only amp things up when I'm doing a huge show, like I've never done the front flip dive over the top rope, but when we returned to Mexico and me and Davey Boy are undefeated in Tijuana, and they got us going against these other really over guys, and then, in front of 3,000 people, sure, I'm going to do a fucking front flip and be caught by two, 250-pound burly ass luchadors. And it feels like falling on a mattress, it's completely safe, then hell yeah. But, in front of that crowd there, wrestling Breaker, who's to his credit, he's a bigger dude, so I probably would be comfortable with him catching me. But usually, if there's only one guy, I say fuck that. You know, if there's two guys, that's just fine. Two people can catch me.
Absolutely, Dan the man.
Because one guy, he might hurt himself trying to catch me or something.
I was gonna expand on a point Mike brought up. You were talking about the getting shoehorned in and the idea of this being the cut and paste, Brian Pillman Jr. And you've seen that in some of the second and third generation superstars where they just kind of get watered down. But then on the flip side, you have your, say, like a Bray Wyatt, where they've never once mentioned his familial heritage. Would you be willing, if the character called for it, to be someone where you go your career without acknowledging that you're Brian Pillman Jr.?
You know, I think about that too, because it's like, oh, well, what's the WWE makes you change your name? I think that I am enough of a performer that I would probably enjoy that challenge, and I would probably not mind it at all. I think it would be a weird, now that I've sort of, opened up about my story, my journey with the public, and I'm on this kind of crusade to get back into the WWE and reclaim my father's legacy. So it would be kind of odd for me to do that. But I think as an evolution, down the road, I think I should. I think there is going to be a point where my range will need to be tested as a performer. And if they're like, hey, we want you to try this gimmick, and, and I'd be like, and obviously you're not going to say no, right? But
well,
obviously with Bray, they're just it's kind of like, okay, people know, about his history, but like you said, it's not a main factor of his character. But while I'm not, quote unquote, copying my father, I am using my story and my history as a part of my gimmick, right?
Right.
Where he wasn't doing that. So it's like, my story to me is very real, and it's very emotional to me with how I express myself to my fans. So right now it's the most organic thing. But the more I learn about wrestling, the more I realize that anything is possible, right? So I brainstormed hundreds of names and hundreds of gimmicks before I got into wrestling. Mm-hmm. And then Cody Rhodes was like, dude, just follow your gut, man. Like, just keep your name. Like, I was like, hey, Lance wants me to change my name, and I'm thinking of all these gimmicks and these names. And he's like, well, nobody knows what you're going through but you, and I think you should follow your gut. If you think you should,
brother, I'm going to tell you something. If my opinion of 48 years in the business means anything to you, changing your name at WWE is tantamount to career suicide. I wouldn't do it.
I think I would, I might get lost in the shuffle if I did,
Well,
but that's the thing. They can't copyright my name because I've already been using it on the indies, and that's my real name. So if they were to say, hey, try this new character, and if I didn't like it, I could always go back to the indies and be Brian Pillman Jr. Or I could say, hey,
and make a better living.
I'm feeling it. I want to be me. Let me be me.
Absolutely.
But that would be a conversation. That's the thing people don't realize. Is all it is entertainment, right? The wins and losses don't matter.
You just brought me into a really interesting area. Dan mentioned second and third generation wrestlers, and a lot of people have this notion that for some reason or another that it's easier for second and third generation wrestlers to get in because of who their, offspring are or were. And I'm hearing what you're saying is actually a challenge for you. How many second and third generation wrestlers do you personally know that are going through that same challenge that you're going through or have gone through?
I've met quite a few. And everybody's challenge is different, right? Everybody's story is different. I know Big Sean Studd's kid. I'm buddies with Flying Fred Curry's son, Nick Curry.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
He's a technical masterpiece of a wrestler. and Big Sean Studd, who's just a physical, huge person, you know.
Oh yeah.
He got his gimmick. The other, you know, but it's just what's gonna like everybody's path is gonna be different. So what's gonna be successful for one, you know, second generation is gonna be different than another.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's all about the timing and stuff too. Like you said, like just because you're second and third generation doesn't mean you automatically make it and automatically get in there.
Absolutely.
I'm very blessed that my father's following was so passionate, like the way that fans remember him. And Cody told me this. He said because your dad passed the way he did and the time he did, he's more or less immortalized in people's minds and in their memories because, you know, it's kind of like Tupac, right? It's like Tupac,
Yeah.
all this music, and then he died. So people are like, oh my God, it's the best music ever. It's, you know, it's going down in history. But it's like, in all reality, if Tupac lived another 10, 20 years, he might have made a bunch of shitty music that like watered down his good shit, you know? So it's
absolutely.
so even though like my father only wrestled 11 years, but that was 11 years of cream, you know, 11 years of variety and range and physical.
Well, the thing that your father had going for him, that your father was, and people know this, your father was not a physically imposing individual. He wasn't a big guy, but he had a personality.
If he was around today, people would, he would be big.
Yeah.
But maybe a little bit smaller than me. A lot of people said he was about an inch shorter than me. And actually,
I was going to say you're taller than.
Put on his old gear. It's pretty tight on me. So
I was going to say when I met you, I know because I remember standing next to him, and standing next to you, I had to look up to you. With your father, I can almost look to him eye to eye.
And I know he wore, I think early in his career, him and Steve were wearing lifts and stuff. So, you know, he did look a lot bigger in the ring, but he was a lot leaner. You know, he's a lot leaner than me.
Sure.
You know?
But what I was getting at is that his personality showed up to the ring before he did. He had this large and in charge personality. Mikey, pick up on that for me, would you?
Yeah, I can talk about Brian Pillman Sr. quite a bit. I mean, he came to the ring, I believe, to Hysteria by Def Leppard before WCW was paying music rights. And, you know, I happened to be there at the Great American Bash '89 as a kid when Brian made his pay-per-view debut against Wild Bill Irwin. And I think he had the first match on the show, and he impressed everybody. And it was a 2-ring show. He was jumping from one ring into the other ring for flying body presses and doing the same move that our Brian today uses, that vaulting kind of clothesline. I was thinking of Brian's white meat babyface persona and thinking we should hook him up with J.J. Maguire, who used to do the music for WWE and WWF, your good friend Angelo. And
I actually spoke to him today. And funny that you should mention that.
Should be Brian's theme song because.
Well, it's funny that you should mention that because I talked to JJ tonight.
Yeah.
And he wrote a song for Brian.
Good.
Called California Blondes. Remember that one?
Mm-hmm.
Mikey, you remember that one?
I remember the Hollywood Blondes tag team, but you're talking about a song for Brian?
Yeah. The song he wrote was called California Blonde.
Okay.
And it's on the wrestling album, by the way.
Well,
J.J. Maguire wanted me to mention that to Brian Jr.
He should.
J.J. Maguire, who wrote the theme music, is a very, very dear friend of mine. And he wrote a song for your father called California Blonde.
Well, he could also write either use that one or write an original one. But my song Title Shot, you can use the lyrics for Brian, because Brian Sr. was what was big about him, Angelo and Brian and Dan, was his heart. And Jim Ross always put him over. That he won the Courage Award from the Cincinnati Bengals because he overcame those neck surgeries from cancer as a baby. And he did have a life where he that grizzled voice that Brian Sr. had was because of all those neck surgeries and throat surgeries as a child, and overcoming a lot of stuff, just as Brian Jr. here has overcome. I think one thing that I would if I could make clear on Brian's behalf, is some people that maybe aren't full-on wrestling fans don't realize that Brian didn't have the luxury of having his father in his life as a physical presence, because unfortunately Brian Sr. passed away when Brian Jr. was only 4 years old. So Brian's kind of doing this on his own. And guys like Steve Austin and Lance Storm have helped and have provided some guidance because they were such good friends with his dad.
Well,
but
brother, if you're going to get guidance,
own.
those are some of the best guys to get guidance from. Let me tell you.
Lance didn't actually know my dad at all.
Yeah, but they had a lot of respect.
Lance had a lot of respect for him. Yeah.
Yeah, but you've done a lot on your own that a lot of people may not realize, that you're kind of out there as a lone wolf. You're kind of going out there as a lone wolf in this thing on your own in a lot of ways.
You're right, because nobody's gonna tap you on the shoulder and ask you to go out there and be a pro wrestler. You got to really want it. And I think for a lot of my youth and a lot of my younger years, I was disappointed because I guess I was waiting for that tap on the shoulder. I was waiting for somebody like Steve or somebody to be like, "Hey kid, you're getting older, and I see you're playing sports and that, if you thought about getting into the business," and that call never came. So I thought maybe I'm not as good of an athlete. Maybe I didn't make enough of a splash, or maybe nobody's keeping tabs on me. So
well, let me tell you something. There are people there are people keeping tabs on you. More people than you realize. I'm one of those people.
Well, they are now. I'm talking.
Well, I will tell you straight up, straight shoot. I'm one of those people keeping tabs on you. I told you I was going to take care of you. There's a reason I'm going to take care of you. Okay? Because I owe a lot of people. You don't need to know, but I do. But I will tell you, and I'll say this in front of everybody. You've got a career ahead of you. And if you're smart about it, you'll do exactly what you're doing. Don't deviate. Trust your gut. Trust your mind. Listen to your heart. Because you're doing a damn good job so far.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Dan.
I was going to chime in. He mentioned overcoming adversity, obviously, and then the success that came from that. Correct me if I'm wrong, you were 2019's Rookie of the Year, PWI, correct?
Mm-hmm.
How does that conversation go about? How does one find out that that's coming up?
Usually at the conventions, there'll be guys, that work for them, and hey, can I get a picture from you for the magazine? And I'm like, all right. So I'm just standing there posing for this picture. I'm thinking it's just going to be a random thing in the magazine, and of course, they like to kayfabe it and surprise you. So they ended up using that picture and saying Rookie of the Year on it. So I was like, well, damn, I guess I was just posing for my Rookie of the Year photo. I wish I knew, that I would have wore something else, but I got my big fanny pack sticking out. So they took that picture at one of the conventions. And then the only other part I heard of it was, I don't even know. I didn't really hear anything about it until right before they were going to publish it. And they were just like, oh, hey, and I think MLW actually made some phone calls too, because maybe they contacted MLW to see how long I had been wrestling or whatever, and with them. Okay. And they were like, oh, well, in 2018, we gave him the Rookie of the Year award with us. And then I guess MLW was like, but it would be really cool if if you guys got him Rookie of the Year, because my real Rookie of the Year, which the Observer actually recognized 2018 as my Rookie year, but I got second place to fucking Ronda Rousey. You know what I mean? How you gonna beat Ronda? It's like shit. All right, well. So I think the Observer put me in as second or third place in there, and then MLW went and did the gimmick with Teddy, and it was funny because it was just totally made up fun little thing where Teddy just got this award made, and you could see in the segment the undertones of him just inventing this Rookie of the Year award. But then MLW goes on to actually acknowledge it, and then PWI kind of jumps in the mix, and they're like, oh, okay, let's make him a 2-time Rookie of the Year. So I think it was like a cool, like, you know, project on everybody's part to just kind of build me up. And also, like, when it comes to the viewers and the readers' votes, you know, the votes were unanimous. You know what I mean? It was like a 69%, and the second place was like 13. You know, so it's like the viewers definitely believed that I was still, you know, in my rookie years, and I definitely think, you know, with my experience that I'm still, you know, warranted to be a rookie. Especially my first year, I was injured for, you know, 4 or 5 months. So I'm very, very glad and very blessed that I was able to, you know, earn those titles as a rookie. And now it's all about moving forward and showing people that I am now, you know, a little bit more experienced. I'm a little more grizzled, a little more injured. You know, I got a separated shoulder and, you know, a tore up left knee. But at the same time, those injuries and those experiences have made me a better wrestler and a safer worker all over.
Absolutely, of course. Mike Messier.
I was just wanting to ask you, Brian, what's the status of Major League Wrestling now? Because I was watching your match with Austin Aries there today, and MLW really does have a good thing going. I think they got overshadowed a little bit by the, you know, online wrestling fans because of AEW's presence. But how is MLW doing as we stand right now?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about, because, you know, when we were getting really hot, and like when I say we're hot, like every arena, dude, we're always sold out. Like we have these certain towns where we just have a really good following. Queens, New York. We go to Dallas, Texas, and it's just popping off. You know, we got the Von Erichs in there, and they're over like fucking Grover. And we go to Cicero, Chicago, where there's a nice Hispanic following there with the luchadors and stuff. So we have a lot of good markets. You know, we have a lot of variety. Yeah. You know, we got the hardcore stuff. You know, so it's like we really were on a tear. We really were going, and we still, you know, before the virus, I mean. But yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, AEW kind of came out at the same time with a lot of their heat and a lot of their star power too. And, you know, more power to them. But you look at a guy like MJF or Jimmy Havoc, guys who have worked for both companies. So you can see that, you know, these are 2 quality companies, and these are 2 places where a young developing talent would kill to wrestle for. So I can't say that MLW is not going to continue to grow and continue to be a great product. I think that me and Davey Boy and the Hart Foundation, and even Teddy, where his credits due, and the amazing things that he can do in the ring, have all contributed to MLW being a major player right now. No pun intended, major league player.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But at the same time, though, like AEW's making those bigger moves, and they're getting the funding that they need to have a real show. So MLW is making some moves here soon to compete with that. And the more that they talk about that high level, you know, competing with AEW, it's very ambitious and it's very exciting. So I'm really glad to be a part of it. But I got to do, you know, what's best for me and
Brian,
the best work I can at MLW, because I don't, you know, I've quickly realized you shouldn't be like on your way out somewhere. You know, you shouldn't be looking for the next big thing. You should be doing your work at MLW. So to say that I'm almost competing with AEW is quite an astounding feat. But I think there are some fans that might find more enjoyment out of the matches we have on MLW as opposed to AEW, and vice versa. And I think that I would make a great fit for either company. But I
was just going to go there, actually. I was going to bring up the AEW question. You know, in my intro, everyone heard me say that you were one of the surprise entrants in the Double or Nothing Battle Royal. Were there any conversations then, or are there now conversations between you and the powers that be at AEW about bringing you in or utilizing you in some capacity in the future?
Yeah, I think the conversation's more or less been not very like detailed. You know, it's just kind of been like, hey, you know, whenever you're ready, you know, kind of thing. Like, I think I have enough. Like, so it's crazy because so many of my friends got signed there, like Marco Stun
Yeah.
and Sammy Guevara and Joey Janela. And it's like, I was buddies with all these guys, like, chilling and being on different shows and being on the indies. So it really is like the full extension of the spirit of the independent scene, because they're actually using real indie guys that they work with, guys that work, PWG and different events and stuff, and MJF who made a big name for himself in the indies. So they really value those guys that went out there and bet on themselves. Darby Allin,
Oh, absolutely.
one of the most talented people I've ever met, very unique, very weird. And that's what I told you earlier, like only the weirdest, craziest people are going to make it in wrestling. Like,
Right.
It's sad because I see guys that are really good. I see guys that are really technical, especially at this local school here. I'm like, dude, you're really good. You're awesome, but you just are not fucking weird enough to make it in this business. You don't go in that ring and do anything that makes me go like, ooh, like you don't have any swagger or charisma or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You ain't got it. And sometimes you can't teach it. And that's the sad thing.
Well, that's a great segue. Talk about wrestling training. And you've talked about yours. We actually have Danny Cage coming on from the Monster Factory.
Oh, wow. I love that.
Yeah. Danny will be on. And I knew Larry Sharp. I knew Larry very, very well.
Okay.
And so we're going to talk about wrestling training. Talk to me about the training process now. I've been out of the loop a little bit in regards to training schools. In certain areas, there are hotbeds of training.
That reminds me, I got to message him actually.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm going to be going up to Pittsburgh this weekend to try to steal some ring time.
Nice.
Okay.
And, if I can stop in Philly and get some time with him too.
Well, brother, if you're around, hit me up. I'm 10 minutes away.
Yeah.
I mean, the Monster Factory is literally 10 minutes from my house.
Let me message him real quick, just while it's on my mind here.
Go ahead, take your time. I'm glad I could help.
Thanks for the reminder.
Reminds me of that story, Angela. We were talking off the air about when I met Larry Sharp and the wrestler that would be Papa Shango /
the Godfather.
The Godfather at that same 89 Bash situation.
Bear the Soul Taker.
That's right.
Yep. Charles Wright. Great guy. Really nice guy. Super guy. While we got a lull in the action here, we just to remind everybody, Thursday of this week, the Godfather of wrestling journalism will be here. Bill Apter will join us. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Great guy.
Brian, you want to do a run-in on Bill?
Sure, I'll run in there and pick him up and drop him on his head.
There you go.
I could do that. Bill's a good dude.
Yeah, Bill's a great guy. He's going to be with us on Thursday. So talk to me about the training process. There are certain parts of the country that are hotbeds for wrestling training. The West Coast, of course, San Francisco, Oregon, here on the East Coast, New York, New Jersey, Chicago, of course, in the middle of the country, and Texas. Where can a young, up-and-coming would-be wrestler, and you can, I'll give you the opportunity to plug whatever school you might recommend. Where can they go to get professional, efficient training without being taken for a money ride?
When it comes to the money, the financially thing, I don't have the best vision of that, because when I went to Lance's, it was like 3,200 Canadian.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what schools are charging in the States. I would say roughly, $1,200 to $2,000 for an introduction kind of training. And then after that, a lot of places have a ring fee after that. You pay $5 to come in to practice and just train and shit after you've paid all the rest of your dues. So when it comes to a financial kind of thing, I'm not really sure the cheapest place to train.
Yeah.
But as far as like schools that I think are really top notch, I really do love Danny's school. I think he's got a lot of smart young kids there that are training because they know as good as I do that it's a good school. Because they do shows and they have consistent training, and like they legit are made to do drills and they're legit made to run and shit. Like it's not like, it's more like a football team,
Sure.
and like a successful program, not just to come in and hang out and do moves and fuck around for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Like, I went to his training class and we were busting our asses and we were working hard. And the next thing I knew, it was over. And I didn't want it to be over because we were getting so much done, But he's like, oh, yeah, that's all we got. I'm like, dude, like, but when you're sitting around, dragging around, doing nothing, you get nothing done. You feel like you're in there all night, but then you fucking bust your ass and time flies. Yeah. And next thing you know, you're a better wrestler than you were yesterday. So I really enjoy his school. Like I said, I just texted him. I'm hoping maybe he'll open up his doors for me this weekend. Going up there to see my girlfriend. So it'd be nice to get in the ring, even if it's just me. I don't know if he lets his students in right now because it's the
Well, you let me know if you're in the area. You let me know for sure. Okay.
For sure. Yeah. No,
I'll tell you what. We promised to bring you back for part 2. We are at the 1 hour mark, and thought I'd keep you for an hour tonight. I know you got a few things that you want to do, a couple more beers to kill, and
no, I actually like to have a couple beers when I do
maybe a podcast. Some herbal medicine to take.
Kind of helps things flow,
I hear you, brother. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's give your social media. Where can people find you? How can they get a hold of you for appearances, bookings, all that?
Yeah, thank you. I wasn't trying to rush out of here. I was having a really good time, but
if you want to hang out,
catch me on. Well, I got to take a shower now. I'm gross.
Oh, okay.
But that's why I got a hat on because my mullet doesn't look very nice right now. But you can catch me on Twitter at Flying Brian Jr. and Instagram at Flying Brian 41. I don't use Facebook very often, so don't even try.
There you go. All right. Well, this is part 1 of a promise 2-parter. Brian Pillman Jr. will be back with us on May 26th for part 2 of the Flying Brian Pillman Jr. story. And we're going to drop the flying and just call him Brian. All right, Brian, thank you, my friend.
No, thank you for having me. I really enjoy it.
You're quite welcome. We'll talk to you in a couple of days. And like I said, if you're around Philly and Jersey, hit me up, all right?
Absolutely, brother.
You got it, my friend. Take care, everyone.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Brian.
Brian Pillman Jr., everyone.
Brian Pillman Jr.
Guys.
Take care, Brian. Bye-bye. All right, you guys. We are back. I think Dan froze up.
No.
He's good.
Oh, there he is.
I was just sitting still because he was talking.
You were sitting real still.
You got MK Ultra for a second, Angelo. Come on.
Yeah. Dan, what do you think, brother?
I think that was great. Had a lot to say, and it's such a unique, for all the second and third, I guess legacy wrestlers is the kind of umbrella they put him under. He has such a unique story to tell. It's nice to hear it straight from him and the perspective. I mean, how cool is that to be able to say, I woke up and I wanted to be a wrestler, and my first phone call was to Steve Austin, and then not too long later you're up in Calgary training with Lance, and it's like such a good story.
Yeah.
Almost, we talk a lot on the show about sometimes you just can't script stuff that good, and it's such a good story.
Well, Dan, when he says that he's blessed, you have no idea how blessed he is. That young man has a lot of goodwill going for him.
Right.
Largely, in some regard, because of his father, but largely because, as you can tell, he's a really likable young guy. Yes,
and he's an amazing talent too. Like he can carry.
Oh, incredible!
I mean, like we talked about with the names, you could call him anything besides Brian Pillman Jr. and he'd still be top 2-3 matches on any card he's on.
And you know what? Let's talk about that for a minute. Mike Messier, I want you to chime in on this one with me and Dan.
Sure.
You know, early on in his career, I haven't asked him. Maybe I'll save it for part 2 to ask him. But he went immediately with the name Flying Brian Pillman Jr., right?
Yes.
In retrospect, Mikey, was that a good move for recognizability's sake, or was it a bad move in that people, as I said earlier, may pigeonhole him?
I feel it's a good move, and I'll the example of someone who, whether their choice or the promotion's choice to not use their father's name and it backfired.
Yeah.
I can give you 2 examples that we'll all know: Curtis Axel and Bo Dallas.
There you go.
And I would hate for Brian Pillman Jr. And look, I'll be honest, I can't put myself in his shoes, but from the interviews I've listened to Brian Pillman Jr. speak about his dad and also his mom, that he's talked about very personal with those Chris Van Vliet interviews and the Stone Cold podcast with Steve Austin. Brian was 4 years old when his father passed away. For him to use his dad's name, I respect it as that's his way to connect with his dad.
Right.
And
absolutely.
So,
and I'll tell you, you know what, Mikey, I'm going to stop you right just for a second, and I want you to continue. But when you said connect with his dad, it reminded me of a visual that I saw the night that I met Brian.
Mm-hmm.
He was wearing his father's boots, and trunks, and it was the Hollywood Blondes trunks. They were a bit loose on him because he's a bigger guy than his father. They should have been tight, but they were loose because they were so worn out.
Right.
But he wore them as a way of directly connecting with his father. The interesting story about that is that, and I don't know, Dan, I don't know if you ever heard this story. This is a true story. There was a woman who bought Brian Pillman Sr.'s boots, vest, and trunks at an auction. On eBay.
I assume that this was after he had passed.
Yeah.
Okay.
She bought them off of eBay. All right. I believe it was Brian's wife, Melanie. I think that's her name, Melanie.
Melanie was his wife when he passed away. Brian Pillman Sr.
And that's it, Melanie, yes. She put his items up for sale, for auction. And this woman bought it. Well, fast forward many years later, the same woman goes to Starcade. I mean, was it?
Starcast?
Starcast.
Yeah, okay.
The convention
in Las Vegas.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And she gives him the boots, the vest, and the trunks and says, I think your father would want you to have these.
That's awesome.
Is that remarkable or what? Go ahead, Mikey.
Cool story.
It's a tough situation. It's a great story because, like he talked about, Steve Austin gave him a weight training belt of his dad's, and I think it's one of those things where, Angelo, you touched upon it early in the podcast that people might have been fearful for Brian because of not only his father's early death, Kurt Hennig, Rick Rude, this generation of mid 80s to mid 90s guys that we could sit here and name guys that died before their time all night. Louis Spicoli, I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And those were the guys that were Brian Sr.'s peer group, and a lot of them died young, lived hard, and died young. Right. And I think that we fear that but luckily, as evidence tonight on the podcast, Brian Pillman Jr. is very level-headed. He is very safe in the ring. He's not going to take any unnecessary bumps, or he's going to limit those unnecessary bumps at least.
And that's why I brought up what I did. We've seen time and time again, Mike and Dan, where second and third generation wrestlers unfortunately met the same fate as their offspring.
Right.
where reckless partying, drug abuse, taking unnecessary bumps or chair shots, or crazy dives that they had really no place taking. And the lack of training to pull it off, quite frankly. And that's why when we do our show with Danny Cage, which is a special interest to Dan, we're going to talk about the level of training that some of these guys are getting, and in some cases not getting.
Exactly. And, I've brought that up before. And Brian talked about AEW. There's several high profile, I don't want to use the term stars, but high profile stars in AEW who were legit outlaw backyard wrestlers who never trained.
Yeah.
And you watch their matches, and it's blatantly obvious it's a guy he's doing moves he saw on TV, and over time you learn how to do them safer, but it doesn't look. It looks like two friends fight, pretending to be wrestlers in a basement. And
Dan,
draw that fine line.
Dan, to your point, Jim Cornette calls that the video game generation.
Yes, and he's absolutely right. And Jim Cornette is not in any way shy of his opinion of like a Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks and Jimmy Havoc, some of these guys.
Yeah, and it's blatantly obvious that, and I understand MLW and AEW, garnering their talent from the indies, because let's be honest, we're all fans of indie wrestling. In fact, dare I say, I probably prefer it over, WWE or any of their byproducts.
Right.
I certainly approve of it over MLW and AEW, but AEW, in my regard, in my opinion, if that matters, is doing justice to the indies by two things. Number one, garnering their talent directly from the indies, and number two, acknowledging it. And that's something nobody ever did before.
Yep.
They never acknowledged that there was this world of indie wrestling.
Well,
You'll never hear the WWE acknowledge that there's even an indie circuit out there.
Exactly. I was just about to say that. The WWE went through a bit where they kind of did a talent, like they rated Ring of Honor and some of the indie promotions. And when you had your Castagnoli becoming Cesaro and Tyler Black becoming Seth Rollins, you change the names. You don't ever acknowledge their past, and they start talking about these guys like these, they're these rookies, they call them, these young up and comers who have been wrestling for 10 years. You're not only ignoring their past, but you're telling their fans, anybody who was a fan of theirs before WWE, you don't matter as a fan.
Well, and that's where I'm going to go, Mike Messier.
Please do.
Okay. These guys had a life and a career before WWE. They were obviously seen and recorded and acknowledged for who they are and who they were up until they got to WWE. And then, as Dan said, they completely eviscerated their history.
Right.
And created this new history for them. But there are people who are watching the show going, oh, that's Tyler Black. I saw him at OVW.
Sure.
Oh, that's Cesaro. What was his name before? I forget.
Claudio Castagnoli.
Claudio. Right.
Castagnoli. Yep.
Right. But they don't acknowledge that. Again, not acknowledging the indies and only acknowledging the quote performance center. If for some reason, or in some capacity, the performance center represents the indies, which by the way, it does not.
No, absolutely.
So, Mikey, tell me what's wrong. What can the WWE learn from somebody like Brian Jr.?
Well, they can learn a lot, and I mean, just to go back and give some historical context, that's been going on since the mid '80s at least. I mean,
Yeah.
when Greg Valentine came on Piper's Pit and Captain Lou Albano made the peace between Piper and Valentine, that wasn't because of a WWF angle. That was because of Starrcade '83 a year earlier.
Yeah.
And I just watched that Piper's Pit a few days ago, so that's why I'm thinking of it. But I remember even as a kid that it was very rare for the WWF, even by '84, '85, to acknowledge that David Schultz and Mean Gene and Hulk Hogan had history in Minnesota. You know, that was big for them. And
Yeah.
I think what it comes, just to give a historical context, the reason why is because Vince McMahon Jr. likes to put his C with a circle or his TM with a circle around everything.
That's what I was saying, Dan. That's what I was saying.
It's
absolutely.
if
He's
you
got
ever
to
watch,
find a way to market it, brother.
well, if you ever watch
Don't
the Beyond the Mat commentary with Terry Funk says that if there's a wrestling match going on anywhere in the world, Vince McMahon wants to make $1 off of it.
Absolutely.
That's why all these promotions that they've helped put out of business, Jim Crockett, Mid-South, AWA, Calgary, et cetera, ad nauseum, that's why they're on the WWE network, because now Vince can make his dollars off of all these guys that he wasn't making the dollars off of until he did. The question,
well, what you're finding now, though, Mikey,
sure,
is that because independent promotions are wise to that, they're doing one of two things. They're asking money that they think they're worth, number one, and number two, refusing outright to do business with them at all.
with
Because
them being WWE,
They, look, it's the old adage of, making a deal with the devil.
sure,
Right. Well, and that was something I brought up. I think the very first bit we did together when we were interviewing Karen McDaniel. I mentioned that
Exactly.
Vince McMahon was buying a lot of these territories that he would run out of business and then buy. He didn't want their talent or their contracts or whatever. He wanted their tape archives because he knew selling those tapes is, like you said, Mike, is the only way he was going to make money. I mean, he had, he goes and he raids Calgary and he brings in like Dino Bravo and those guys.
Yeah.
But at that point you're a little past your prime. But now I can sell some tapes or there's the WWE network. There's, these matches from the 70s and 80s. The entire AWA archive is on the WWE network now. Vern Gagne would never have given Vince McMahon a stick of gum, more or less $1. And here Vince McMahon's making money off an entire other territory.
Exactly.
Well,
Go ahead, Mike.
The question you asked, Angelo, and I didn't answer it yet, was convince. If the question is convince McMahon Jr., who I think is 72 or 74, learn anything.
74.
74. Can he? Yes. Will he? No.
No.
And I think I've reached that brittle, nasty point, along with a lot of other internet smart wrestling fans who are at that. It's a real sick point to be at.
Yeah.
But we're basically waiting for the old man Vince to fucking die, and I hate to say it, and that's why.
I mean, you know what, Mikey, we gotta just call a spade a spade.
Sure. Yeah,
I mean that's really it.
Yeah,
and I think one of the things that's kind of I hate to admit that part of me is in that group as well, and one of the things that's helped push me in that direction is how good the NXT product has been compared to the main roster. When you see what the WWE could be if you take Vince McMahon out of the equation.
Well, and here's the thing, Dan.
I mean, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I don't, not that I want him to die. I don't want anybody to die.
No,
sure.
Here's the thing, though. I want him to walk away gracefully. I want him to acknowledge that he's done an amazing job of creating this conglomerate. Mm-hmm. I want him to acknowledge that he had. I know, Mikey, that's a whole nother show.
That's so angry.
I know that's a. We're gonna have that show.
I'm hulking up, brother. I'm hulking up. Go ahead.
we are. I promise you, we are gonna have that show. But I would like very much for Vince just to, acknowledge what he's done, pat himself on the back, take a bow, and walk away.
Yeah, I think
that's what I would like to see.
I'd like to see Stephanie Seymour and Cindy Crawford come into my bedroom right now, but that's not going to happen either. Even if they're both 50 or whatever.
Well, I think one of the things that's kind of, my opinion, I think one of the things that's keeping them around is the bottom. I mean, just last week, Raw had its lowest rating in the history of the program, going back to a main event of, Hacksaw Jim Duggan versus Shawn Michaels. I mean, lowest rating in history. I don't think Vince McMahon wants to leave his company when it's in the worst state it's ever been in. Get that little ratings bump. Do something to. ESPN just announced they're going to start mixing rosters again, and there's some other stuff.
I understand, Dan, what you're saying.
Yeah.
But as Mikey will tell you, because we're older and we know, especially me, because I'm older than both of you, it's a catch-22.
Right.
And it really is a catch-22, because as long as he's there, they're going to continue to garner low ratings.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Him staying there because the ratings are low in hopes of bolstering the rating it's a non-starter. It's a non sequitur. Yeah. It can't happen, and it won't happen. He's lost touch. He had they called him the man with the Midas touch. He had the golden touch.
Right.
Everything he touched turned to money. Okay. Now he may as well have a brown finger. Okay. Because it's shit.
Yeah.
It really is. Go ahead, Mike. You're chomping here.
I'm chomping because before WrestleMania this year, 2020, which was a pre-tape WrestleMania, and I did a video that I said maybe this WrestleMania will be great. We there were such low expectations that if anything was decent, we'd enjoy it. And I did enjoy this WrestleMania. I liked the Boneyard match. I liked the Cena Bray Wyatt movie match. But there was a rumor at the time that Vince McMahon is going to announce his retirement and hand the business over to Shane McMahon. That was the rumor. That did not happen. Okay. Then last week, I did a podcast right here on the Wrestling with the Future podcast family of shows, the Refs Roundtable. Yep. Myself and Nikita Breznikov discussed what if Vince sells to ESPN. And that hasn't happened. Now, that could still happen, but it hasn't as of this minute. The point is, Dean Ambrose said on the Chris Jericho podcast that Vince is, quote, going to die in the chair. And it's a very it's a very strong statement, and it's very vicious and sick, but I don't think it's from a place of hate or anger from Ambrose Moxley.
No, it's not. It's not.
And Jericho kept saying over and over again, Jericho, and they just had the Revolt, or the team formerly known as the Revival, on there.
Yeah.
And the same thing came up, which is all these guys want the WWE and the business to do better. We as fans want the WWE and the business to do better. Right. But we've hit our breaking point. And last night, I can give you a quick example. I tuned on. I saw Becky Lynch's big pregnancy announcement. I stuck around for the next match, which was Bobby Lashley was beating up one of Xena Vega's guys. And I said, you know what? I'm going to watch the Aaron Hernandez series on Netflix, because I'm not going to sit through Raw. It's not challenging my intellect. As a wrestling fan, I'm not being fulfilled.
Exactly.
I've already seen the big thing of the night. I mean, they didn't build it up. Just here comes Becky, and she's pregnant, and let's give her some hugs, and we're done. And I really didn't feel inclined that my life was being serviced by sticking around for another 2.5 hours after that.
Well, here's the problem. Okay. The problem is, as long as, and follow my train of thought here, because I think both of you will understand it.
Yeah.
As long as the WWE continues to tank in the ratings, so too will MLW and AEW and Ring of Honor. They will all follow suit.
Yep. Because
WWE, like it or not, face the fact or not, they are the leader. Where the leader goes, everyone will follow. If WWE is doing exceedingly well, guess what, guys? AEW does well. MLW does well. Ring of Honor does well. New Japan, they all do well if WWE does well. If WWE is in the shitter, so is the rest of the business.
Yep.
And that's a sad truth. It's hard to swallow, but it's the truth.
Well, and you listen to somebody like a Jim Cornette who just absolutely eviscerates the current product.
Oh my God, he's brutal.
And you hear the way he talks about it. He wants to be a wrestling fan. I know people his age and older and people my age that they grew up in the 70s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. They want to be wrestling fans. I want to turn on Raw and be entertained. I want to watch wrestling and it be good, but it's not. I don't want wrestling to fail. I want it to be good. And that's what's so frustrating is it's not a sitcom where it sucks, I'll watch something else. I want wrestling to be entertaining, and it isn't.
Yeah.
I see these moments, like I'll admit, I watched the Money in the Bank pay-per-view on Sunday, and I thought it was actually surprisingly entertaining. And there were moments where it's like, this could be what your program is every week, and it's not.
Yeah, but it was, Dan, for years.
Exactly.
It was for years. Here's something interesting. And this might surprise you, Dan. When Jeff the Ref and I started this podcast a year ago, he was the fan. I wasn't. Okay?
Right.
What got me back into watching wrestling again was going to indie shows. And I would watch a little bit of the product on TV just to stay current for the podcast.
Of course.
And then something interesting happened. They started getting better. And I was watching a little more. And then somewhere along the line, Mike Messier, somewhere along the line, WWE did what they always do. They took something great and fucked it up. And I haven't watched WWE products since. Right. I will watch AEW, and I'll even watch, and this will surprise you, I'll even watch NWA. Okay.
I'll admit, Power has had some good episodes.
Okay. If you accept it for what it is, I put NWA Power, and you might laugh at me for this, but I put NWA Power in the same category as the original Glow. Okay.
Because of the comedy with the former Damian Sandow and the mask guy and
it's because it's a television show, a comedy show with wrestling as the subtext.
Well, the Nick Aldis and Tim Storm stuff was really good.
I was going to say,
you can't go wrong.
Maybe not a comedy, but it is definitely, and that's part of what its appeal was, is Power reminded me of the old, when I was growing up, it was local channel 13, the local wrestling show, where half the matches were in front of a painted background. It's a television show that happens to be about wrestling. It's not.
Brother, let me tell you something, Dan. Let me sit back there, young man. Let the old man tell you a story. Back in the day, back in the 60s, way, way long before either one of you were a thought, okay? There was studio wrestling used to come on here in Philadelphia on Channel 48, okay? It was on the UHF channels. Studio wrestling from Pittsburgh. That's where I was first introduced to Bruno. First time I ever saw Bruno.
Right.
The announcer was Bill Cardill. Bruno was on the show. A young Johnny Valiant, who was using the name John Sullivan at the time. A young Greg Valentine. Wrestling in a building the size of a shoebox with a painted background, 10 chairs on 3 sides of the ring. That was it. No chairs on the hard camera side. Right. Okay? That was it. That was my introduction to wrestling. And guess what? I loved it.
Absolutely.
I loved it. Because to me, that painted wall looked like an arena full of people, and I didn't care and I didn't know.
Yep.
Didn't matter. Okay.
I think it's funny. We've talked to NWA just I guess a couple months ago now. They had a short run, but the Rock and Roll Express won the NWA tag titles again.
Yeah.
And that moment, I mean, I was so excited. Jim Cornette, who was the announcer at the time, he gets out of behind the table and he's celebrating in the ring, and it was just such a moment. I mean, guys, I love the Rock and Roll Express. They were my favorites growing up.
Oh,
but,
I know.
let's be honest, many years past the peak of their glory days, I guess, whatever you want to call it. But
Brother,
here they are. Well past their prime, they're still one of the greatest products because they got in the ring and they told a story. And the second they started telling that story, I was hanging off the edge of my seat. Are these guys going to do it? And they did, and it was exciting. And I mean, it probably wasn't that good of a match. I don't care because I was invested.
It didn't matter. That's
Exactly.
the point. It didn't matter.
They're the same.
That
Morgan
night,
still work and Gibson can't.
Yep.
and Mikey will remember because it was me, Mikey, and Jeff the ref, and we were going on the air at 7:30 during the show. Jeff was watching the NWA, and he called that win on the air.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he goes, number nine. I went, they won? Are you fucking kidding me?
Right.
Ricky is 63, Robert's 61, and they won the tag titles. Good for
Tell
them.
you what, might be 61. Ricky Morton still got the best looking mullet in the business.
Well,
Let me
don't
tell
go.
you something, brother. He rocks that mullet too, and he's over.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, listen, fellas. We got a big couple of weeks coming up. We've got, of course, this Thursday, Bill Apter, the godfather of wrestling journalism, will be with us.
Looking forward
That's
to that.
going to be a really, really good conversation. Also, Danny Cage from the Monster Factory will be with us on the same show.
nice.
Because Bill's going to be with us for about 30 minutes. So we're not going to have a lot of time with him, but I'll get him to come back. Because I got his phone number now.
Uh-oh.
The other thing is we've got Ladies' Night coming up, but we've got 3 special shows featuring 3 of the most dynamic women wrestlers in the business. Ann Casey, we've got Joyce Grable, and Leilani Kai. And that's going to be big.
Absolutely.
That's going to be big. We're going to do separate shows for each of them. We also have, I believe, on June the 26th, we're going to have a special non-wrestling episode with Mike Williams from the Sage of Quay. And Mikey Messier, Dan, do you know who Mike Williams is?
I'm afraid I don't, actually.
Okay, I want you to check him out.
Sage of Quay, real quick, Angelo. He has a lot of videos about Paul is Dead, and Beatles fans or even non-Beatles fans.
The Paul is Dead conspiracy. You'd mentioned him before. That's where I'd heard the name. Okay.
Right.
He also just did an interesting 3-hour video with Vince Russo, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, Vince Russo became a real advocate for those videos and turned on a lot of the brand members onto the. I thought it was Sage of Quay. Was it Quay or Quay? Quay.
Sage of Quay.
And really fascinating guy. And his YouTube channel and all his stuff is just blown up. His website, so that's going to be fascinating.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, we're going to have Mike Williams for about an hour and a half.
Good.
Nice.
So that's going to be a really good show. We've got Scott Teal coming in, Sam Houston. Oh my God, who else do we have? I have my book, but I don't feel like pulling it out right now. We've got Nikita Brezhnikov coming back. Oh, we've got a special roundtable coming up with Nikki Brezhnikoff, Mike Messier, yourself, Dan, and me. We're going to do a special episode dedicated to politics and religious angles in wrestling.
Oh,
Be
cool.
fun.
Okay.
I'll cite some of them right now. Of course, the crucifixion angle in ECW.
Mm-hmm.
A similar angle, satanic angle in WWE regarding Stephanie McMahon and The Undertaker and Steve Austin. That's just a couple off the top of my head.
Vince McMahon wrestling God.
Yeah.
I think God no showed that one, or did he make a? Did he show up late and do a run-in at the end?
Yeah, Mike, do you remember the episode of Raw where Undertaker came out and the line of druids came out, and then Vince unveils himself? What was that?
It was
greater power.
The greater power angle. Yeah,
Thank
Dan nailed it. And I think it was the summer of '99, and basically what was going on was that behind the scenes they were talking to bring in Christopher Daniels, who was a pretty up-and-coming young guy, but going way back.
Sure.
Yeah,
PWI had mentioned the original pitch was Jake Roberts, but he was in no position to be on TV at the time.
Yeah, I mean, what I heard from Bruce Pritchard and Christopher Daniels himself, and I think even Austin acknowledged that it was supposed to be Christopher Daniels, that the WWE, everyone but Vince, wanted to bring Christopher Daniels in.
Right.
They brought him into the office. Vince took a look at him, and he's short, pal. He can't be in this. So Vince, took his mighty pencil and erased Christopher Daniels and put himself right back in the spot.
Of course he
wasn't
does.
he getting over at the time with the Fallen Angel gimmick? Wasn't that where that came from?
He was, but it was odd because...
Oh, my God, he was huge over with it.
But that wasn't even in TNA. TNA didn't even exist yet. This was like 99, so Daniels was an indie guy, but he was an over-indie guy.
Mm-hmm.
And let's put this: he could have pulled it off. He could have pulled it off as a mouthpiece, nothing else.
Christopher Daniels did the Fallen Angel also in ECW.
Yeah,
he did, but very towards the end of ECW, there wasn't much time left.
Yeah, but he was around though.
Yeah, my point is that he didn't have national exposure, so it would have been
not on that level.
But with the audience they had back then, I mean, that was when Raw was getting 6-8 million people a week. I think the audience would have recognized him. At least a lot of them would have.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
I gotta say,
I knew who he was.
Christopher Daniels once did me a real solid. It's a long story. I'll make it quick. I left my eyeglasses in a Ring of Honor dressing room. And let's put it this way. I wasn't exactly welcome back into the dressing room because I had just left it. And Christopher Daniels, I meekly went back and asked for my glasses, and Christopher Daniels gave me my glasses back. So I've always been a big fan of his ever since then.
There you go. Well, fellas, let's plug our socials. Go ahead, Mikey.
Well, you've just on the show. You've also got Phil LaRussa, friend of Jimmy Snuka, coming in June. You've got Tom Jaron from Old Hollywood, the master of sitcom and memorabilia from the 1960s.
Yep.
You got Scott Teal, the writer.
Yeah.
You've got a couple of other shows in what's left of May. Doc Diamond. You're going to bring in, I think, Tombstone Jesus again.
Yes.
And then Brian Pillman will be returning on May 26th. And maybe I'll pitch him my angle with him and Dustin Rhodes at AEW, Angelo, if you think I should.
What do you got to lose?
Yeah.
As long as you have your script ready, I don't think he's going to want you shuffling for it.
Oh, I don't need to read it. It's off. I mean, we had it on the January 3rd episode of this very show. Jeff the Ref was a big fan of it. My Dustin Rhodes, Brian Pillman Jr. But as far as Mike Messier goes, MikeMessier.com. Recently finished another very short film, 40 seconds, titled The Never Was. I've been putting stuff like The Wrestling Sun and my sit down with Sandman on the Wrestling with the Future podcast YouTube channel.
Yes. And I want to tell people that Mike Messier will continue to upload more pertinent short films onto Wrestling with the Future, MikeMessier.com. And Mike Messier's YouTube channel as well. But Mike has a an abundant collection of films that he's done over the years. Some of them new, some of them older, but they're all very entertaining and thought provoking. So you'll get used to seeing a lot of a variety. I think there's quite a bit of variety on our YouTube right now.
Mhm.
We've got the Refs Roundtable. We have our flagship show, of course, and Mike Messier's interviews and films. You can catch an interview by the way, on the YouTube channel with the champion boxer Vinny Pazienza.
Yep.
Great interview Mike did with Vinny Paz.
He was the
And we're going to try
referee
and
for
get him on the
Brawl.
show.
Yep, he was the referee for when Butterbean knocked out Bart Gunn in WrestleMania 15. Vinny
was
Paz was the ref in Philadelphia.
Nice.
And how about you, Dan? We got something to plug here.
Well, I mean, we have our new and improved YouTube channel you mentioned, Wrestling with the Future podcast. We're on Twitter, Wrestling Future, no G, Wrestling Future. And then our Facebook page, Wrestling with the Future podcast. I'm also on Twitter, _WWTF. So check us all out. We've got a pretty good social media presence right now.
Yeah, and we have a new private group as well, Wrestling with the Future podcast.
Mm-hmm.
That's a group you got to answer some questions to join. And we're almost 200 members right now.
Yes, including a lot of our previous guests who have commented. And the conversations have been very active so far. Yeah,
in fact, we've got Ann Casey joined, Joyce Grable joined, Tony Villano, the president of the International Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, joined us. Johnny Mantell, Scott Casey. They'll all be back on show, by the way, in the upcoming months.
Right.
And of course, as Dan just said, Wrestling with the Future is very visible on social media. Wrestling Future is on Twitter at Wrestling Future, Facebook.com/Wrestling with the Future, and our group is Wrestling with the Future Podcast. That's our private group if you want to join it. If you've got questions or comments for the show or guest ideas, hit me up at wrestlingwiththefuture@gmail.com. And I answer everything that comes in. If it takes me a couple of days to get back to you, bear with me because I'm one person, folks, and there's a lot of stuff to go through. So, for Mike Messier, for Dan the Man Sebastiano, I'm Psychic Medium Angelo. Take care, everybody, and happy wrestling. Bye-bye.